In the last 24 years, something amazing has happened, a series of miracles having to do with the region of Mount Sinai. Jim and Penny Caldwell, welcome to Prophecy Watchers.
Thank you so much, Gary. We really appreciate you having us here.
It's really good to have you here, and I want to hold up one of your products. It's called Exploring Mount Sinai, and it's really 4 hours of video about this region around Mount Sinai. I think everybody in the Christian world would immediately recognize Mount Sinai as the mountain where the law was given.
Right.
And where Moses received the commandments from God. But there's so much more to it than that, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. First, I want to go back and sort of fill in the beginning of the story. Back in 1992, Jim, you were an oil, engineer in Saudi Arabia.
Right, yeah. We had the pleasure to go over to Arabia and live there. We were originally, I had promised my dear wife a couple of years, and that we would come back and start a hardware business. That was my plan. But she agreed to go, and we ended up staying there 12 years. And what you're seeing in this DVD is 25 years of research and an accumulation of thousands of images and video. But back to the beginning, in 1990, after the Gulf War in 1992, at the end of 91, I had this vision of the Ark of the Covenant being brought back to the place that it was built, and that this happened suddenly. I was not a man prone to visions or anything like that, but it sent us on a trip into Egypt to go to the traditional location of Mount Sinai. And that's really where it all begins. It goes from that point to the visit there, and then on into Egypt.
And you had to sort of bone up on the Bible, according to what I saw in your DVD. At that point in time, you had a vision about the ark and about a man and about this region. And your next job was to find out what the book of Exodus said.
Well, yeah, and just to demonstrate, Bibles are illegal in Arabia. You have to smuggle them in. We were fortunately able to smuggle this in. But to read it, I had to actually tear the chapters out. You can see that I would tear a chapter out and bind it with tape, and then I would fold it up and put it in my pocket and sneak into the refinery at night, where I would study and go through, and you can see that it's just completely marked up, written, and highlighted. And what I did is I formed an identikit, I call it, a list of things that we would find when we went to the traditional Mount Sinai. That was the plan.
And by the way, it's very detailed when you read Exodus. It struck me when I heard you talking about this on your DVD that there is so much detail in Exodus.
It gives you a mental image of what you should see. Right. We would watch. We had a smuggled in copy of the Ten Commandments, and we would watch that with our kids every night. And I knew that Cecil B. DeMille had used some actual video from the traditional locations. So I'm looking at it, trying to see, caves or anything about the particular mountain. And so I had built this case of information, and then January the 1st of 1992, we took off from Ras Tanura, traveled 24 hours to get to Jordan across country, broke all the Aramco rules of traveling alone in a vehicle by yourself.
Wow.
And then we got into the traditional location, and we were able to come right up into where the St. Catherine's Monastery is and where the mountain is. And be honest with you, we realized there was no connection between what we were seeing and what was written.
Well, let's back up just a little bit because, and Penny, you guys basically took a vacation trip at that point.
We did.
You sort of drove off across the desert, and you ended up in Egypt, and you drove all the way south to the Aswan Dam, and then back up again. Fill us in on that. And
We did.
And tell
Further
us
than that.
what you found out.
Well, that's exactly what we did. And after all these days in Egypt, we entered in at Nuweiba, the port of Nuweiba. We had to take a ferry from the Gulf of Aqaba, from the port of Aqaba in Jordan, and take that ferry over to Nuweiba. We entered there, went up to Cairo, all the way down to Aswan, as you said. And on our way back, we ended up at the tip of the Sinai Peninsula in a place called Sharm el-Sheikh. And I found a book called The Gold Mines of Midian by Sir Richard Burton. It was a reprint of a book in 1878. And a map in the back of that book showed the land of Midian actually being in northwest Saudi Arabia. And at that point, we just kind of went wild. We pulled out our maps and said, you know what? The scripture says Midian is where Moses was tending the flocks of his father-in-law Jethro when he had the burning bush experience. And that is where God told him that, this is where you're going to bring the people back.
Now, I'd like
from
to say
Egypt.
just one thing at this point in time. My Bible, my personal Bible, and many, many other Bibles that I've looked at have maps, and you can look back there and see the track of the Exodus. And invariably, they have the Jews coming down to the south of the Sinai Peninsula,
That's right.
and then circling back up to the north again. And St. Catherine's Monastery down there in the south part of Sinai is generally billed as the place
That's right.
where they received
Right.
the law. And you show in your video, as you looked around, and this goes back to you, Jim, you didn't see all the things that you expected to see having studied Exodus, right?
This is exactly right. It was such a letdown when we went there to the mountain that I felt that my vision was in error, that what I had thought we were going to find was totally wrong. Either that site was wrong or the scriptures themselves were not accurate, and I couldn't believe that. So we dismissed it. And we spent the next 32, 33 days going through Egypt, as she said. But we learned a lot. We hit all the museums. We went on visited all the sites, and we saw what ancient things were like. We studied. We went through the museums, purposely looking at everything from chariot wheels to anything else in the way the stone culture looked after thousands of years.
Right.
And we kind of got a mental image of that. In the process, coming back to Nuweiba, we found this book she talks about, The Gold Mines of Midian. And when she saw that, she opened the book up, and in the back was a map. And in that map, it talked about, Sir Richard Burton talked about the land of Midian being in northwest Saudi Arabia. And that re-energized us. There was an article in there by a guy named Charles Beck, Dr. Charles Beck. Right. This is in the late 1800s, had proposed that Mount Sinai was in Arabia, had written a book, Sinai in Arabia. And I pulled out my NOAA maps, and we located this spot. Oh, there was another book, The God of the Mountain, by Emmanuel Anati. And he on his map shows 13 possible locations of Mount Sinai, with Jebel Laws being one in Arabia. And once I saw that, it was like this re-energized the whole idea of going to Mount Sinai. So we zipped across the Gulf of Aqaba, back into Jordan, back into Arabia, and then we got to Tabuk, and we kind of used Tabuk as our hub, and we ended up going out to the mountain.
That's right.
And thus began an amazing adventure, or set of adventures, that continues to this very day.
Yes,
right?
it does.
It
does.
It's not over.
It's not over yet.
And over again. It has been amazing.
Now, I want to go back. I'd like to take you back to the spot when you drove into Arabia, into the region of Midian. And by the way, look it up. We're going to put it on the screen so you can see that map. But just look it up for yourself. You can find maps everywhere. And check over in northwestern Saudi Arabia, and you will always, Midian, you're going to see it there. And yet, it's been ignored all these years. So you drove over into this region now that is called Midian in all the maps, and you started to see things that looked familiar. that you might expect to see having read the book of Exodus, right?
Absolutely. One of the things that was gravely missing when we entered into the traditional site was we didn't even see any petroglyphs or the carving on the rocks. You know, you'll see this text that's called Thamudic on the rocks in many, many regions throughout all of this area, but we didn't see anything like that heading into the traditional site. Almost as soon as we crossed back into Arabia and got down into this area, we entered it from the south, and we started seeing this writing on the rocks, and we started seeing huge evidence of stone circles round about, and many of them. And after being there for a few years and going out in the desert, we knew that these were very ancient parts in the landscape. They were definitely left there from thousands of years. So as we began to head further north into the heart of where this area is, we came upon a fenced-off area, had an archaeological warning sign. In other words, don't go trespassing in here, it's not allowed. And as we went around the side of this, we began to see these ancient cattle on the rocks, and they were very, very clear. And they were in two different forms. And as we looked at that, we immediately began to think, goodness gracious, possibilities here. Could this really be the area where the golden calf was worshipped? I mean, that hit us right off the bat. And having archaeological evidence on the ground so quickly, as soon as we entered into that area, it was just like, my goodness, we've already seen more here than we saw at the traditional site.
Over there in Mount Sinai
in
St.
the land of
Catherine's
Midian.
Monastery, which is
Right.
really not the right site.
That's
And
correct.
you're quick,
We don't believe it's the right site anyway.
Yeah, you're quick to say that. But and I'm listening to you, what you really began to see was evidence that a long time ago, a lot of people had been in this area that is now deserted.
That is precisely right.
Now, who were the people? And of course, that's a leading question.
Well, we firmly believe it was the Israelites that Moses led out of the land of Egypt. And the more we began to explore in that area, the more we found many, many, many more things. Absolutely, in that area, there were a huge number of people at one time. There's just too much on the ground for that not to have been a fact.
It wasn't always easy going, was it, Jim? For example, on that first trip, you told me you got arrested.
You know, it sounds like we just breezed in and out of these places. It really does. And I look back on it and I think, especially from this point of view, looking back in history, you think, who was that guy? Were we really able to do that? It took a supernatural strength to be able to take my wife and my family and go out into this area. And at that time, God provided. I mean, it was miraculous. And it's like every step of the way, He was leading us to see things. If we hadn't come in from the south, number one, we may never have found the mountain. But number two, we saw important petroglyphs on rocks that have turned out to be significant in other research. Research about, I always call it the chalkboards of history. This language that's written on these rocks out there is revealing information about all of this that has happened in the area, but it spreads from the Sinai region all the way into southern Arabia. It leads you on to believe where the wandering in the wilderness went.
Exactly.
Now, after you got out of jail, after you got out, you just, and a lot of people wouldn't have done this. You decided we're going to go back, and you did.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I want you to talk about is the place where all the cattle are displayed on a wall, a rock wall there, and there seem to be what look like cattle chutes, and there are some apparently white marble fragments that are disc-shaped or pillar-shaped, all right there in one location.
Back to the Bible, what we should find on the ground, there's evidence there on the ground that matches the text exactly. And so that was part of what was amazing to me, first off, that we had the privilege to go there to see these things. But there are pillars, and you can look at different things on the ground. There may be different interpretations, but the fact that there are pillars there were significant to me. You call them drums, you can call them Neolithic, you can call them many names.
But they're in the Bible.
They're in the Bible. And that was significant. There are altars. There's a structure there. As a young man, I was always out at my grandfather's farm working on the bullpen. And the bullpen is a certain type of device that allows you to handle large animals. You have to take them down a chute. You have to turn them at an angle so their eyes, the second one coming, doesn't see what's happening. You bring them up to a place where you can slaughter them. Normally you put them in a squeeze and brand them and that kind of thing. Very difficult to handle large oxen. Well, at this location, they sacrificed oxen. You had to have a mechanism. It's there. It's on the ground. I mean, it's unbelievable.
You see the
Still
chutes.
intact. The chute is there.
It's still there.
The altar there where the animal would have been cleaned and sacrificed.
And even ashes.
Ashes, there's a pit. In 1994, the government had come in and they did a slight excavation. They came in there and they cut a partial through, but they excavated right where this wall was, where there was an earthen altar, and I call that because the Bible specifically says that at that point Moses built an earthen altar, and they were sacrificing the animal. But the point is that below that altar, at about 4 feet where the ground level was, they dug down an additional 3 feet and pulled ash out onto the ground, and it was black as coal. Unfortunately, I didn't catch a sample of it at the time, and should have, but all that is there. I mean, each part, you're standing there at that site, you look up, you see a cave, a la Elijah's cave. I mean, you see each one of these things. Another thing that we noticed was when you look at the top of the mountain from that perspective, you see a bluish color stone that represents or could represent this idea of God coming down on the mountain, and under his feet as if it were a sapphire pavement.
Yes.
That's there. All of these visuals that you would see in the text are actually there on the ground.
Now, you told me you made a total on that first go-around of about 4 trips, over, back.
Right,
And
right.
I want to ask you about trip number 4, in which you came up to the Split Rock. And I'd like to spend some time there.
Okay.
This is such a story in the Bible. Everybody knows about the children of Israel suffering from a want of food and water, and they began to grumble and complain, and they came to a rock, and Moses struck the rock, and water came out. And I think most people see the rock as being maybe about the size of a VW Beetle, and not a real big rock. And
Right.
and when Moses spoke to it, and the water came out, maybe a little stream about that wide came out, a few gallons.
Right, right.
But that's not what you found, right?
Oh my goodness, that's not at all what's
No.
out there.
I think it's huge.
It's so much bigger, and that's one of the things that I must say throughout all of these trips. I believed these stories before I ever saw these things, but one of the things that is so massively impressive to us is that our God is so much bigger than you initially think. I had the same kind of thought with you from a child. Everybody had their little cup and there was a little trickle, and they got their little...
A little bit of water.
That's right. But if you have,
Yeah.
quite literally, you have to think logistically, if you have the numbers that we assume came up out of the land of Egypt,
And that would be approximately
600,000 plus just men of fighting age, according to the
According to
scripture.
the scripture, absolutely.
We are of the belief that there were millions.
a lot of water.
You're going to need a lot of water.
Yeah.
Not
For
only
flocks.
that, they've got flocks with them, they've got herds with them. If you don't have a massive miracle, but is anything too hard for God? No.
Now, one of my favorite parts in this video, and believe me, you're going to love it, is seeing Penny up at this rock where the water came out, and you see, is it granite? Is it what's?
It's a granite. It's red granite, they
And
call
you
it.
see red granite that has obviously been carved by a massive flow of water. It takes a lot of water to carve a hollow space in rock.
Right, it truly does. And we even have pictures of ourselves sitting in
I remember that.
some of these areas that are hollowed out.
So thousands of gallons of water had to be flowing out of there.
Oh, we think so. And the whole area down, the rock is massive. It sits up on a hill of boulders that's probably 200 feet high or so. The rock itself is 50 to 60, 65 feet high. It's massive. And out in the whole front to the west of this rock, where all that water would have come down, the whole general landscape is about this deep in crushed granite, just as the erosion has come down. I mean, I can remember it as we were walking out there with the backpacks. It makes a certain crunching noise as you go along. But in this area, to the west of this rock, right in front of where these channels have been cut out, the whole area, and I mean a large area, is blasted away to the bedrock. What would have happened if water did come from this rock and poured out down in that valley and washed all that sediment away, then it would have been laying on that bedrock and therefore wouldn't have been sinking into the sand. It would have been pooling up. And if you have 1 million people in flocks and herds that are already about to die of thirst, they could have all come quickly to this area and everybody taken their fill of water. It would have produced like a giant lake right off the bat.
Wow.
You can see this from satellite.
Yeah,
by
you
the
can.
way.
Oh.
And you can see
see
the
it.
effect of the, around the split rock, you can see where that alluvial sand has been washed away.
It's
you,
clear.
You walk from that crunched granite that she's talking about into an area that's blown clean. And the only thing that could have
Big
done that
miracle.
would be a massive flow of water
So
coming
to
down
recap,
off that hill.
you've got the sacrificial area where they handled a lot of cattle. You've got carvings on the wall showing cattle. You have a mountain here with a cave in one side of it. You've got a split rock. Is there any place nearby that shows the remains of where a tabernacle might have been?
There are on the east side of the mountain, there are 2 specific places that we have seen that could very well be the remains of where that original tabernacle was put up. And you know, after the golden calf incident, it was moved. There are 2 areas that we've zeroed in on that are highly suspective of exactly that.
There's in these areas, when you move stone, when you clear an area, it can stay recognizable for thousands of years.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that is what has happened here. They went in and they moved the stone and they formed this rectangular wall, which would have been the perimeter of the tabernacle, an area where they would have cleared the big boulders out, and it's still there today.
Yeah.
It's not perfect, but you can make out the rectangle and you can see that there was something there in the ancient past.
You know, if I went there, and having seen this, I basically visited the place, but very, very good documentary, good photography. But if I went there, I kind of put myself in that spot, I would just be stupefied. If this is the place that
It is amazing.
Yeah.
that it claims to be,
Yeah.
I don't know that I'd be able to stand on my own 2 feet. I'd probably fall to my knees. Did you get that feeling?
First time we walked into this area where the altar is, that happened to me. I fell to my knees. I could not believe, having been disappointed at the traditional location and experienced all of this, that we walked into that site, and it was overwhelming. And even to this day, I still think about some of these events, and they give me chills. I mean, it never gets old. We are out here, in this DVD, we try to bring you there, let you experience it for yourself. And that's I put as much energy as I could into that part of it. It's visual, it's video, it's us telling, but there's all that trying to welcome you in, bring you into this place so that you can see it. Whether you'll ever be able to go there, that's another question. But at least you can experience it through the DVD for now.
Wow. And I did. This DVD is phenomenal. I want to tell you that, and we're offering it. It's called Exploring Arabia's Sinai. And I think it's approximately 4 hours, correct? On 2 DVDs.
It is 4 hours.
And we are time limited here at Jim and Penny. We really are. We cannot go into the depth and detail. And you guys, believe me, they go into depth and detail. And you'll see sites. Can I just give away one that just blew me away? A rock out there that you found that has a menorah carved into the rock.
Absolutely.
And
you
now,
know,
if nobody would do that but the Jews, right?
that's exactly right. That's what we tell people.
Well,
You know,
how can that be a letter or a etching?
Yeah.
It's a perfect replica of a menorah.
And everybody ignores the place.
Yeah,
It's as though it's not quite time yet.
That's what it is. It's
Precisely.
a timing
That
thing,
has
I
to be
think.
what it is. But you know, when Dr. Kim first showed us that picture of that menorah on the rocks, it just literally, We knew it had to be there somewhere, but he and his family found that, and I'm telling you, who else would have put that there save the Israelites? Nobody
Well, it's
else would have put
connected
that
to the
there.
Talmudic text, and that has
Yeah.
been proven to be Yahud was the ones that put
right.
that there, and Yahud in Arabic is simply the Jews.
That's right.
We're going to do more of this. We're going to do several more visits with Jim and Penny. But right now, because there's so much more to tell, we have scratched the surface, maybe not even that. Exploring Arabia's Sinai, and we're offering that to you for $34.95. It's 2 DVDs, 4 hours, extremely well produced, plus this book by Penny Caldwell. That would be you.
That's me.
And it's called The God of the Mountain, and it's a good read and got lots of text, descriptive text, lots of pictures. We're offering that to you for $19.95. All you do is go to the Prophecy Watchers online bookstore. Click there, scroll down, and you'll see all of these books very quickly. We're going to display them so that they'll be easy to find. In addition to that, we're putting together a package of 2 additional items. One, Patterns of Evidence and the Exodus. This is an excellent DVD, and Leonard Muller's book, The Exodus Case. And by the way, this is a beautifully produced book, page after page of clay coat stock, glossy color pictures. And Leonard is a great writer, and he just puts it all together. And the pictures in this book, most of them were taken by guess who? Jim.
We originally took
That's right.
160 plus pictures that went into his book anonymously. He didn't even know who we were at that time.
So we're offering the God of the Mountain, the book, $19.95, Exploring Israel's Sinai, $34.95. All 4 of these items are putting together, calling it the God of the Exodus package. Yours for $99.95, which is considerably less than it would cost to buy them separately. So, listen, what can I say? They have the most exciting story I've ever read, and I'm not exaggerating. Seriously, it's kind of easy to get jaded. You know, you can read something and they read this and read that and say ho hum, but the story you have is no ho hum. This is really exciting stuff. And you are, I must say, you're rather subdued sitting in this chair right now, but that's not the real Penny, right?
No, I generally have to really sit on my hands, so to speak. When
You'll notice I'm holding her down. I've actually got
when I'm talking
got her
about
jacket
these
and I'm
things.
holding her down.
When Jim and Penny are on stage, Jim has to fight for the opportunity to speak.
You bet.
But together they tell this incredible story, and we've only begun to broach this story. We've got just a little less than a minute right now. We've seen a mountain, Mount Sinai. We've seen a split rock that shows evidence of water. Cattle handling facilities, all built by the tribes of Israel under the instruction of Moses and Aaron. I mean, is that amazing or what? I still can't get over it, that you find these things.
Out in the middle of nowhere. This is the most remote place on the planet. You're 40 miles from any piece of asphalt. And it's amazing that it has remained intact. Mm-hmm. That's the thing that is the beauty of this, is that God has had a covering over this site that has been lifted for this day and age.
Jim and Penny Caldwell, thanks so much for being with us. And we're going to do another of these programs, so stay with us. We've got a lot more to say. I'm Gary Stearman. We're watching. You keep watching too. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter, or follow us at facebook.com/prophecywatchers. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.